So guys, thanks for coming to JAM380. It's the introduction to the NDK for game developers. My name is Ardiri. I work in the dev relations team. We have Julien here who will help do some demos for you guys to show you some cool stuff. And we have Stefan. And both Julien and Stefan work with Scoreloop. So how many of you guys are actually game developers? All of you? Good. Okay, so it's good news today that we announced Unity. This type of presentation is actually really low-level stuff, so if you don't want to use a cross-platform framework like Unity or Marmalade and so forth, then this is the information you want to get your hands on. So good news is I'm actually a game developer myself, right? So I actually have a number of games on the platform already. So key thing here is that we have openness to the platforms, right? So there's no need to go and buy a Mac or to work on a PC. You can, at this level, you can work with all three platforms using NDK. Okay, so freedom of choice. What's great as well is we also have a lot of industry standards, right? So if you have anything using OpenGL or OpenAL, right, it's all there. It works 1.1 and 2.0. At the same time, QNX is a POSIX-based system, so all your like standard libraries, libc, networking, Berkeley sockets, all that stuff will work out of the box as well. So the great news about this is you actually will easily get your games ported across. In addition to that, we also have a lot of effort internally in RIM to actually contribute to open source. Right? So there's a couple of frameworks here, like SDL, Cocos 2D. Gameplay is actually written by or managed by a team within RIM. Right? It gives you a cross-platform approach to using OpenGL at a very low level, and it, of course, works on BlackBerry 10. So there's a lot of stuff on the GitHub website, so you should definitely check it out. And we actually always improve these things, right? So there's a lot of third-party libraries that already work on BlackBerry 10. So getting down to the basics, this is effectively the minimal BlackBerry 10 app, right? So if you guys, remember writing stuff for Unix back in the days, this is a real app. It doesn't do anything, right? It basically starts and closes. But effectively, this is the foundation, right? So you have your classic mainline, and you can do everything in pure C. Right? You can also use C++. So what we want to do here is basically, I'm going to go through some of the low-level things basically called BlackBerry Platform Services. This is obviously the message we want to keep pushing out. So obviously we don't have cascades at this level, right? But you still need to take into consideration the fact that you should integrate, be social, and make this thing look really beautiful, right? So I'm going to highlight exactly the areas where this stuff comes along, but I think it's pretty obvious for you guys as well. Right, so BlackBerry Platform Services, this is actually the underlying system that you build anything interacting with the service layer of the devices, right? So basically it gives you an abstract way of working with like sensors, using the event management of the device, interacting with the navigator, input and output like writing to the screen, multimedia libraries, getting device information, payment services, and of course working like with network services. Okay, so a bit of code. This is basically a valid event loop. Of course, the equals XXX wouldn't compile, right? But that basically is there as a template. So effectively, you run as a single thread, request an event, right, with a certain timeout, and when you get an event, you can then process it. And basically what we have here is every event has a domain and an event code. So it's not like you're going to be fighting for event codes across the different services. So there's a little template that exists. So when you handle a certain type of service, right, you basically have to request those events to be pushed to your event queue. And then basically when you get the domain, you can check to see, is this domain the specific service you're looking for? And if it is, you can then process that event, right? So very, very easy stuff. For the navigator, of course, you just do navigator request events. Then the events start getting pushed. When you get a navigator domain, then you can go ahead and process these. And stuff for game developers that are really important is knowing when the user wants to quit the application, which is the navigator exit, dealing with the swipe, right? So swipe down, swipe back, and so forth. And more importantly, working with the orientation window state. And the last one, not many people know about, but effectively if the device is running low on memory, you can receive a message here and then you can start cleaning up some assets and freeing some memory so the navigator doesn't terminate your process. So in terms of invoking, this is the whole integrated piece. There's a navigator invoke, and you can specify a suite of URLs, like for example going to a website or opening the camera to view some photos, looking at the settings, or look at like videos, for example. So all these are well documented. If you need to like link to a Facebook page and so forth, then it's effectively one line of code. Of course, you have a button as well. So when it comes to window handling, of course, you guys, there's no cascades. So you want to, two options. You either want to work with raw pixels or work with OpenGL. Right? So first you have to create a screen. So you create a context, create a window, set certain properties. For example, if you want to have a game that you're porting from MS-DOS, I have a couple like that, and you need to have like a 320 by 240 resolution, you can actually request a window of that size. And BlackBerry 10 will scale it up for you. Right? So there's no need to do pixel doubling and all these type of things. You specify the size of the window, and the OS will render it appropriately. At the same time, it will also translate all touch events to that window space. Right? So it's a good tip if you're doing porting. For example, I have a game on the iPad, and I actually have a resolution of 1024 by 768, and it runs perfectly on all the BlackBerry 10 devices. So the user doesn't feel anything, as long as the aspect ratio stays relatively the same. So creating a window is basically the size of the dev alpha, 1280 by 768. You would specify, what type of screen format you want. Like if you're doing 16-bit games or 32-bit, you would do RGB 888. Right? You set the property of the format, and then you can actually request the window to be a certain size. Right? So as I said, for the MS-DOS, you do like a 320 by 240 if you're doing modec stuff. Okay. So for frame buffer, if you want to do, like the old 8000 hex in the MS-DOS days, basically you request the buffers to be created, and then you can get a pointer to the frame buffer. Right? And from there, you can just do whatever you like and manually draw all your pixels. Alternatively, if you want to use OpenGL, we have both. Right? So basically, if you're using OpenGL 1.1, you would include these ones. If you're using 2.0, you just use a different set of headers. And everything that you have that's working on other platforms, like all the EGL calls, they should work without any problems. Right? So we won't go into any code on OpenGL at this point. I don't think we have enough time. So when it comes to working with the user, right, so basically, I mentioned before, we create a screen, we create a window of a certain dimensions. If you want to process those events, then you have to request screen events. Right? And screen events, basically, the event structure gets polymorphed, converted to another event structure, and then you can start requesting information. So this is an example of how you would get the idea of this. So the events you're interested in, most of these make sense. There's one that's a little peculiar, right? But the multi-touch events are effectively, touching the screen. You can actually have up to 4 contact IDs as well, so you can actually process like pinch, zoom, and so forth. We have the keyboard events, naturally. It works both for the Q10 device and also the on-screen keyboard. An interesting one, which most people don't realize, is the first one, which is basically the ability for you to turn a mobile phone or a Bluetooth mouse, right, and have actually a mouse cursor on the device. So if you want to actually handle that scenario as well, you would then handle the event pointer event. Right? So sometimes you can use an old BlackBerry 7 device connected to a Playbook or a BlackBerry 10 phone and actually use it as a mouse. Right? So it's one you should at least support, because if anyone comes up with a Bluetooth accessory of some form, then that's one you want to catch. So working with sensors, right? So we used to have a presentation on sensors. But of course, I think the template's pretty simple. But ideally here, what you need to do is before you request events for a specific sensor, just check to make sure it exists, right? So you just say, is it supported? And if it is supported, you can then, process that event based on the domain, which is the sensor get domain. So a few that you would be interested in using. I've seen a lot of games use accelerometer. Basically, there's a whole bunch of these set of sensors. The light and proximity are actually quite interesting if you want to do something funky in your games. But effectively, once you have this, it's pretty easy to request events. Basically, for every type of sensor, there's a one-line API to get the properties, like, for example, the X, Y, and Z of the accelerometer. When it comes to audio, of course, we have OpenAL, right? But if you're more hardcore like myself, then you want to do ELSA. Right? You guys know ELSA? The Linux sound system? So basically, at this level, you can request a 22 kilohertz, 8-bit stereo system, and then write all the bytes yourself. Right? So one of my games that's really interesting with this is when the game goes in reverse, I play the music backwards. Right? So it's not devil music, but you have the freedom to do this. There's also a multimedia render. So there's multiple formats like MP3, etc. The codecs, you have to check exactly which codecs are supported. But there's actually two great samples that exist on the GitHub. One is video playback that shows you how you can embed a video in your games or your applications, and alternatively, the ability to play a WAV file, right? If you're not hardcore and you want to use ALSA, right? So you can easily use these APIs to present information to the user. So when it comes to working online, and this is a key thing about making sure you have this quality user experience, another good BPS service is the network status events, right? So you can request to say, tell me when the network goes up and down and so forth. And we actually will see this in one of the demos later on, where if we disconnect the network, then one of the features of the game disappears, right? So very easy. You can either request events and then process when it goes up and down, or at any time you can also query the availability of the network. Right? So there's no ability to say, is this a Wi-Fi network and so forth, but this may be added in future API updates. Right? But basically, if you don't have a network connection, don't try opening sockets. Right? QNX is great, so that it won't freeze the device. You won't have the swirly little thing. But effectively, always check before you do. And if you need a network connection, then present something to the user. Right? Give them that quality experience, not just the lagging experience. So this brings us on to Scoreloop. And Scoreloop is the reason why Julien and Stefan are here. And this was part of an acquisition that happened just over 2 years ago, I think it was. Just under 2 years ago. The great thing here is this is how you can be social, right? This is how you can have, we're going to show demos utilizing all of these functionalities, right? But basically, you can challenge other people, you can do global high scores. It's also cross-platform, right? So if you're doing stuff with multiple platforms, you can integrate Scoreloop and then have all the same reference base. There's an app called Game sitting on the device, and this is basically where you can see other games that support Scoreloop. And this is also a way of getting recognized to users, because the users go into this application and they can see exactly what games are supporting Scoreloop, and it's actually a good way of getting marketing. Right? So just registering with the service will give you exposure as well. So that's if you wanted to write everything yourself, right? And some of you may. I liked it. It took me about 4 or 5 hours to get my base system working, so it's very easy to integrate with the system. We have a couple of libraries that are already supporting BlackBerry 10. So SDL is a very old solution that gives you, frame buffer support and, of course, some OpenGL. It has audio and multimedia playback. Key thing here is, always watch the license. Right? So this is not a developer-friendly license, so to speak, being a lesser GPL. But there's other ones. So we have gameplay, for example. As I mentioned before, Sean Paul Taylor is actually going to be doing a presentation on the various set of SDKs that exist. Great thing here is it gives you a full scene graph, right? And also has multimedia playback, audio, and also a lot of particle engines have been ported and added to the library as well. So you should definitely check this one out. And great news here, it's Apache, so you can do whatever you want with it. Cocos 2DX is basically coming from the success of the Cocos 2D on iOS. So basically, someone took that, tried to keep the APIs to some level of parity, and being the cross-platform. Right? So if you're using Cocos 2D, migrating across to Cocos 2DX is a little bit of work, but not much. There's a couple of inconsistencies with the APIs, but effectively, this will give you a low-level subsystem you can build on top of as well. And of course, it has scripting support, which makes it more interesting for some people. Being an MIT license, it's also developer-friendly, right? So you can do whatever you want with it. When it comes to commercial licenses, there's a couple of frameworks that exist. You saw the demo today in the keynote of the Ogre 3D. One of the partners we work with is Marmalade. And Marmalade actually have been working with RIM for quite some time. We had an offer a couple of months ago offering a free SDK, a playbook device. But a lot of games are written using Marmalade, and the great thing here is you do get hardware acceleration, right? So they've basically done all the hard work for you, and there's also cross-platform as well. But of course, it comes at a cost being a commercial license. So just go to the madewithmarmalade.com and you can find out more about this. So with that, I think we can show some demos. So what we want to do is, since I'm working in the EMEA, I reached out to a couple of local developers with Julien's help to basically showcase what good apps look like, especially around the social point. So Basically, we're going to show some indie developer games, and we'll start with Chasing Yellow. Any of you guys downloaded this? Hello, or was this not Chasing? It's the other
Saving
one.
Yellow.
Saving Yellow. Right? It's like an Angry Birds clone. But this is actually quite interesting, and the great news here is it's done by Tactile. It uses Cocos 2DX. It has leaderboards and challenges, and what we can do is do a quick little demonstration. We'll switch across to that.
Right, so
Julien
that's
talk.
the Scoreloop section. So as you can see, it's a full integration. There's leaderboards, challenges, achievements. These are the three main things that you can do with Scoreloop on BB10. So if you look at challenges, the way it works is it's basically asynchronous multiplayer. So what that means is that you play your session first, and then whoever else in the world or a friend can play that session against you. So that you can see that here, there's a player who opened the challenge, but I can also open a challenge myself by challenging a friend. That's my list of friends down here, and I can also play a rematch from the history here. So that's basically what Scoreloop is all about. It's about playing games with your friends. So not only seeing leaderboards is just the context. It's also taking it to the next step with challenges, which is basically getting pinged by your friend to play a challenge, but also pinging back by being able to play a rematch. So that game is a very popular game on iOS and recently came out on Android. It also integrated Scoreloop, so the leaderboards that I'll show later are shared across Android and BB10. So yeah, like I said, doesn't audio?
No, be scared, Yellow.
All right. So I'm going to lose that challenge, obviously.
This is where the network check is always valid, right? So I guess you guys are saturating the network for us.
Yeah. So I'll start that again just to show you the gameplay properly. If it comes back to life. There you go. So another good thing that this developer did is in the entry screen, you have a play online buttons, and that's what's really important when you integrate Scoreloop. Scoreloop can do a lot for you in terms of visibility. I'll show you how later with the Games app, we'll get to that, but in terms of how you integrate Scoreloop, it's really important that you implement really easy entry points like that play online button that basically gets you to the challenges section. But in terms of gameplay, that's what it looks like. That's, as Aaron said, that's a game that was ported through Cocos 2DX, so it was a pretty easy port. And then they just plugged in Scoreloop.
It doesn't take a minute.
Endless runner. So really, so you have to get better than me at that. But it's an endless runner, which is a very popular type of gameplay on mobile these days. You've got missions, and basically it's also freemium. So you keep collecting those stars, and with those stars you can buy power-ups like this one. So this one is going to keep me from dying one time, like it just did. And I can also, of course, you can implement IAPs through BlackBerry World to monetize your audience and get power-ups faster and get better against your friends.
I'm coming for you, Yellow.
And so, yeah, you've got that little girl running after you. It's pretty fun.
Much safer.
She also comes in a boat as well to catch you, so a lot of interesting challenges here.
So that's Chasing Yellow, and then,
Next one, wait.
so that's what it looks like in the, yeah, so, yeah, go to the next slide.
You missed it. There we go. So it's Fruit Blitz.
So another game that that is a full integration on BB10 is Fruit Blitz. So that's fully coded in C++, OpenGL, yes, and OpenAL for the sound. The leaderboards, the interesting thing is that the leaderboards are actually the home screen. You can jump in. So in terms of usability, as I said, that's actually a really good use case, really good example of a great integration, because the leaderboards are the home screen here. So right away, you see what you have to do to get up the leaderboard against your friend, for example. So here I'm number 4. My score is right at the bottom, so I don't have to scroll up and down forever to see where I'm at and what I need to do to move up the leaderboard. And the really interesting thing also is that play online button, again, at the bottom. So you get the regular offline mode where you're going to play. So that's a regular match 3 game, so let's jump right in it. So that's actually a fairly different type of game from Chasing Yellow because it's short session based, so 2 minutes every time. But that's also very good for adoption rate because the players know how long it's going to take them to play a challenge. So let's not go through 2 minutes. The other thing that you see here at the bottom is achievements. So that the more achievements you get, the more visibility it will get you on Scoreloop in the Games app. So the way Scoreloop works is it basically hooks up to the Games app, which is here preloaded on the deck on every BB10 handset. And when you sign up for it, so that's my profile picture. And what you see here is a very dynamic newsfeed. And that newsfeed is basically fed by activities from Scoreloop-enabled games. So that's achievements. Whenever you unlock an achievement, that gets into that feed. Whenever you win a challenge, whenever you get a new score that gets you high up on the leaderboards, that posts a news here in that feed. And so what that does basically is social discovery, because when we looked at what we could do on BB10 to kind of be different and show something, fix a problem, and the main problem that game developers have these days on the other platforms is getting their app discovered, getting them their game discovered. And what it does here is show to your friends what you're playing, so your friends can play this game with you. And that's what playing games is all about. Playing games are not meant to be played alone, right? So that's what we enable here. That's the way it works, basically. You just have to look at the news feed. You select a news. You say, oh, let's look at what Carl is playing. All you do is tap on that icon. Here I can play the game because I already have that game. But if I didn't have that game, I would get a link to AppWorld straight ahead. So let's look for a game that I don't have. I think I have them all, actually.
Someone's playing games all the time.
This one. So you should see. So see at the bottom, there's the BlackBerry World link, and that gets me directly to the store. So what that means for you guys is that you're going to get more downloads if you integrate Scoreloop through social discovery. So whenever the player is playing a game and unlocking achievements in your game, his friends are going to see that and going to be interested in playing that game too, because they know they can play that game with their friend.
All right, so the last one, which is actually an interesting story behind this one, because I've been competing with Julien over the last week.
You'll see that in the leaderboards.
And it's a game called Dynastunts.
So that's the interesting story here is that this is a one-man show. Well, you'll see the gameplay. So yeah, it's a similar way of doing the game. It's purely native, OpenAL, OpenGL. The Scoreloop integration here stands out by the profile picture. So if you looked at the Games app before, you saw that I had that custom profile picture, and I got it from that game. And what that is basically potential for cross promotions, because your friends are going to wonder where you got that cool icon. And the way it works is here. You just tap the profile icon, and this is using Scoreloop APIs to upload a new profile picture to your Scoreloop-wide profile. So this will be your new profile picture in the Games app, in any other game that uses a profile picture. So you can just change it by tapping, and that's my new picture. And in the leaderboards, you'll see that I have some work to do to catch up to Aaron. 60,000 points, yeah. And achievements were also integrated. So whenever I unlock that 200,000 points achievement that get posted to the Games app, someone else may see it, Stefan may see it and download the game for that reason, because he knows he can play that game with me and Aaron. So if we want to have a quick look at the game.
Might be a bit fast.
Yeah, it's a bit fast because there's something going on with the HDMI. But that's purely native game, as I said. You can do tons of stuff like that. There's explosions going on. You collect stars. Gameplay is 1 minute. Let's die here. As you can see, pretty awesome. That's the kind of stuff that you can do with Scoreloop and the NDK.
Actually, we have another demo we can show as well.
Yeah, we have some time, right?
Yeah, we have plenty of time. So
what do we want to show?
Beach Buggy Blitz?
Yeah, Beach Buggy Blitz is also a freemium game, so it's kind of reminiscent of Chasing Yellow, but it's in 3D. Again, C++, OpenGL. It's going to take a little time to load, but basically, so racing game, you can upgrade your vehicles, you can upgrade your avatar, you can buy power-ups, and let's just show you.
So the great thing as well
time.
is that this shows you like what these devices are capable of doing. So you're not restricted to match 3 type games. You can really get some high performance stuff on these devices.
So here is the point of entry again from the main menu to Scoreloop. And the cool thing that these guys did is that they sync your progress through Scoreloop. That's another thing that I didn't mention earlier. So it's not just leaderboards, achievements, challenges. It's also that you can sync they sync your progress, the achievements you unlocked, your scores, and the coin balance. So you don't have to start again from scratch if you play on your Q10, for example. So that's a really cool thing because also with tablet games, you're not going to want to start your career again from scratch on another device. So like I said, racing game, you can tilt using the accelerometer. And what you do is you collect coins. You can break fully destructible environments, so you can just destroy those palm trees. So I have 16 seconds, you can see up there, to get to the next checkpoint. And at the next checkpoint, there you go, I get 10 more seconds. That's a shield. And I keep collecting points, and I'll show you later with those coins I can just buy tons of stuff in the store. And again, it's a free game based on monetization through BlackBerry World and the IAPs. And you just see it's beautiful, everything you can render. Fully destructible environment, as you can see. Just those stones out there are not destructible, but the next checkpoint is up there. So it's kind of a mix of Temple Run, if you've played that on other platforms, and maybe Mario Kart, if you will. You get pretty cool jumps here. I still have that shield, so it won't slow me down. And now I'm going to get stuck, but I can always go back. So that's what it looks like, basically. Another good thing is to always remind the player that he can check out the leaderboards from the main menu and from the game over screen, so you can see. Well, you're gonna have to play that one too, right?
Yeah, I have to. I installed it yesterday, so.
So there are different ways you can implement leaderboards, but basically, yeah, we can help with that. You can come talk to us if you have any questions. But that's the kind of stuff you can do. And whenever I get question? Go ahead. Full screen? Yeah. It's automatically scales.
Because now the new BBK have side of screen, no?
Yeah. So automatically for
full screen they have done anything for.
Exactly, and so the question was actually asking about how to handle the different screen resolutions. So as I mentioned earlier, when you create a window, I had that little bit of sample code, that would be the same on all the devices. It actually would even squish on the Q10, right? So you can specifically say, I want a window of this size, like from another platform, and then deal with the events exactly the same way. So what happens is when you have a window, you basically specify that as the main screen, and it will go full screen. You saw in this case here, we had Dynastunts running on the HDMI. The reason why it's going so fast is because the VSync on the HDMI is a lot quicker than the normal device. So typically you would get 60 frames a second, but I think in this case, this projector is pretty massive, pretty powerful. So that's why things are running a bit faster. But ideally, we have the first devices with a 1280 by 768 screen. The second generation touch devices, as already have been announced, will be 1280 by 720. Right? It's in the resolution. So basically, the games will have the same aspect to a certain degree. It will just shrink a little bit. Right? So if you have any circles and stuff like this, you may notice it. But generally, the same code will work on both those touch devices. But of course, when you go to the Q10, then of course you're looking at a 720 by 720 screen, and then of course it's going to look like someone squished it from the side. Right? But the games will still run, and you don't have to do anything. Just a question of how you want to handle those different resolutions. I think the key thing is just focusing on the aspect ratios. Make sure they remain consistent. So for the touch devices, the full screen, it shouldn't matter too much, but there will be a difference in your code for the square device. So, Julien.
That's, again, a game that would work really well with challenges because it's an endless runner. So every time you get a different score. And the thing you want to avoid with challenges is to get a draw. There you go. That's the kind of stuff you can do with Scoreloop and the NDK to make games on BB10.
So you can play all day. This is what we do. This is our jobs. It's crazy. So, Julien mentioned a critical point. I'll switch across to this. And basically, distribution and marketing, right? So, the key things here is, you can have a freemium game like the beach ball or the beach buggy game. It's free to download. It gets viral. People, you can actually purchase coins in inside the application itself. Right, so you can get you didn't show anything with the customizations, but it's, you can do a lot of customizations in games. If you can do this yourself, you should definitely take advantage of this. But the key thing here, how do you sell? All right, so of course, Julien showed it already, but there's basically an on-device store, and it's called BlackBerry World. Right, so basically, if you publish your application, anyone can download it, pay for it, etc. From a developer point of view, and I've gone through the process myself. Right, it's really easy to sign up with. Right, it's free. There's no $99 a year subscription or $25 first upfront payment. The royalty system works very similar to other platforms. So basically 70% for you, 30% for RIM, for handling the hosting of the files and the payments, etc. You do have to provide some payment details, and right now there's a dependency on PayPal. Right, so basically you get paid every month to your PayPal account. I get a nice little beer fund from my game, so I'm quite happy with that. When it comes to releasing, it's pretty much the same as other platforms. You define some metadata. You make sure you have some icons, a featured image, so if you ever want to get featured, or even within the games application, if you get in that carousel, right, you need to have something that's going to appeal to the user and say, look, I want to download that game. Right, screenshots and a description. And basically, once you have this, you then upload a bar file. And a bar file is actually a BlackBerry archive, which is effectively a zip file. Right, so it's up to you how you want to make money. Right? Do you do free? Do you do paid? Right? Great thing about BlackBerry, with my own personal experience with other platforms, is that BlackBerry users tend to buy stuff more. Right? So if you look at some of the other platforms, then there's a lot of free stuff out there. People want to get stuff for free, so you have to go into ad revenues or in-app purchases. But basically, you can do whatever you like. I would recommend you always start with a paid version, unless you have something very appealing that people can buy upgrades within the applications. So when it comes to the purchase power of the BlackBerry users, they're more inclined to buy applications, right, than expect stuff for free. Right. So another way of getting noticed, as was shown in the keynote today, is the idea of the Built for BlackBerry program. Right. So this is not easy to get. Right? I know that I have a couple of games. A number of my friends have games, and we're still struggling to get our certification. And we work for RIM, right? So it's pretty tough. But basically, the idea here is make sure you have a tutorial. Make sure it's very easy to use, very intuitive, right? The idea here is that being certified gives you this stamp of recognition, right? So people are going to know this is a great app, right? Some of the games you saw here. I'm sure they've been applied for Built for BlackBerry. I think some of them may have already been approved. Right? Key thing here is you get this peace of mind for the end user. They can trust what they download. And this will also give you improved visibility in BlackBerry World. So what I mean by that is that I believe the plans in the future is the carousel will only contain Built for BlackBerry applications. Right? So if you want to get featured, you will have to have this certification. And also in regards to search results, if you're searching for an application, some of the Built for BlackBerry applications may end up on the top of the list. Right? So it's definitely worth getting visibility. Right now we only have 70,000 apps. And I mean only. considering we've only been on launch for 6 days or so. But basically, as was mentioned in the keynote, we have 1,000 applications a day, so you will find very quickly you're going to have challenges when it comes to being visible within this platform. Right now it's good because there's not many developers around, and this is why you guys obviously are here. But at some point, depending on features like this, will actually get you promoted. So that's about it for this presentation, and I think you guys can ask us a lot of questions. We have plenty of time, but I wanted to outline a couple of other sessions we have. Right? So if you're interested in knowing about promotion and monetization strategies, we have JAM380, and that's actually later on today. Unfortunately, at the same time, because I think these are two great presentations if you're looking to...
Great way to talk about it.
Yeah, so basically, another good one is obviously looking at how to leverage BlackBerry Messenger and Scoreloop, right? So it's a tough decision to decide which one you want to go to. In addition to that, later on, we have ad service and in-app payments, right? So if you're looking for a freemium model, this will be the presentation you want to have a look at. Then we start getting into the more interesting stuff tomorrow. So we have a presentation by Nick Smith from Marmalade. Right? It's going to show you how to use Marmalade, their commercial dev kit, and basically show you how to quickly prototype stuff and actually have the ability to go cross-platform as well. Then we have 2 sessions by Sean Paul Taylor. One is actually how do you take an existing iOS application or an Android application that's already native and actually migrate it across to BlackBerry 10. Right, so this may be more focused on the UI elements and so forth because from an underlying system, it's very easy to port, right, as long as you're using POSIX and libc and so forth. Another interesting topic was the idea of this open source game middleware. Right, so this is where he'll talk about the gameplay, but also talk about some of the other frameworks that exist, like Cocos 2D and so forth. And if you are, I guess all you guys are native developers, but if you are interested in knowing what you can do with HTML5 and ActionScript, there's also another session on Wednesday telling you how you can port games. So we have a lot of information online, and this is one thing I actually liked about RIM when I started developing for BlackBerry 10, is there's a lot of great documentation on the microsites. Right? So you go developer.blackberry.com/native. You see all the samples. You can decide if you go Cascades or the low-level NDK. But you have a good OpenGL demo that you can take, and from that point you can just start plugging your own code in. So it will give you the framework and give you the foundations you need to develop. There's also a dev blog, and I actually posted a guest blog entry just over 6 months ago. Where I actually talked about how I ported my games, right, from my cross-platform framework over to BlackBerry 10. And if you're looking at understanding what the pieces are for this, then you can search for my name on the dev blog, and you will find a good article explaining all the steps I had to go through to port my stuff. We also have a lot of great videos, right? So we have a lot of engineers within the company who show live demos. They record these, and we post them all on the YouTube channel, right? So when it comes to developing native games for BlackBerry 10, you guys should have a blast. It should be very, very easy. So there's a number of developers, and some of the games we didn't show, but I know that I've worked with, individually worked with developers. I send them a playbook. I work with them, talking over Skype. And, most developers have the whole frameworks ported in 4 or 5 hours, right? And then when I see a demo, I send them a dev alpha, right? So basically, at the same time, we're also engaging with you, right? So if you have any questions about, how to get started, or, if you need access to seeding hardware and so forth, then, RIM is doing a lot, or BlackBerry is doing a lot as of today, to actually, give you the capabilities to write your applications. And I think that's it. Oh, they added a slide there. So, I don't know if they announced it in the keynote. Did they mention it in the keynote? The catalog? How many of you guys have BlackBerry 10 phones? Some of you? Lucky guys, yeah. Right, so even if you have a playbook or like an old BlackBerry 7 smartphone, I believe there's, you can download the conference application, and it can give you an overview of some of the sessions and speakers and so forth. Then, of course, we have some surveys, but I think the key thing is tonight, which is the appreciation event today. And I think that's the last slide. So I think with that, we can close with some questions, right? If you guys want to pick our brains about something or get some experiences of how it's been like to work with BlackBerry World and so forth, then I'll open the floor to questions. Okay? Yep.
Is there an example available online that includes the Boost library, for example, like the whole set?
So the question was if there's a sample for the Boost library. I believe
Basically a functioning game engine.
I think Gameplay 3D has Boost. I'm not too sure. I know it has Box, but yeah, there should be one available. But most of the time these third-party libraries are just they're all written in C, so they just compile, right? So the compiling environment is actually GCC, right? So if it works on other platforms, it most likely will work on this as well. But the samples that exist, like the Gameplay 3D is a really good example because it gives you the complete framework. All you have to do is add your models and define your scene graph, and then everything works, right? But I know that they have worked very closely with integrating service APIs like like Box2D and so forth. But you'd have to check that. Anyone else? Yep.
A couple questions actually. What about libgdx support? Is that
To ask about libgdx?
Yeah, libgdx.
I'm not familiar with that library actually.
Well, it's kind of a cross-platform library as well that allows you to deploy on desktop, HTML5, Android, iOS. So I was wondering if you were working with that.
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if we're working with that right now, but it's I can definitely take note of it and I can pass it to someone. Like I know that Sean Paul Taylor, he may already know of it, and he if it's not being worked on and it's very easy to add, I don't see why we wouldn't contribute to it, especially if it's open source.
It uses OpenGL, so it's as well. It's Java-based, but the backend is OpenGL.
So it should be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing is, I've checked your website and there is not much information about the GPU and all this kind of technical stuff.
All right. So the question was about the more technical specs. Sorry, I had to repeat the question so everyone can hear. So technical specs on like the graphics processor, right? So there are two graphics chips that are used, and they probably weren't public because we wanted to keep it a little secret. But basically, it's the Texas Instruments GPU, and the other one. What's the other one?
Qualcomm.
The Qualcomm. So the exact specs, I am pretty sure that we can get a blog post that's going to outline that, because right now in BlackBerry World, when you add an application, because of the differences between the two chipsets, you can specify, is this a Texas Instruments build or a Qualcomm build, because there is some differences with like image, the texture compression and so forth.
Yes, I work in Imagination Technologies, so I'm working Power VR, which is to license the GPU to Texas Instruments. And I actually did part of the port of the BlackBerry 10 SDK to making it public and stuff. So, but the thing is that I found that there is almost no documentation of it, and we support Power VR texture compression. We have some other tools like to tune the performance of the system.
Yeah, I can get you in touch with someone who may be able to give you the complete specs, but I think because we just had the launch, so that's probably why things are not public yet. But I'm sure that will be very easy to get specified, because we do have the separation in BlackBerry World, because there are differences in the chipsets. So I'm sure there'll be a good reason to post that there are two differences and give more information on the chipsets. Okay. Yep.
What's the Scoreloop integration like with WebWorks?
So the question was Scoreloop integration with WebWorks. You guys knew that question was going to come up, didn't you? So I believe it's on a roadmap. Right now, it's only supported in the native environment, right? So it has been requested by a number of devs, right? So to actually have this, it should be possible for you actually to use a WebWorks extension, for example, and actually call the native libraries, right? So that's an alternative for you as well, and that's really what needs to be done for the HTML5 framework. It's just that the team has been extremely busy with the launch and getting things ready. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't have it as a criteria built for BlackBerry, because we didn't have an API for the HTML5 or even the Adobe Air run or Android runtimes. But you could easily build it by writing a custom extension, right? But I think there is plans for having that released.
There's no plans announced.
Yeah.
No date announced.
Yeah, we can't tell you when, but
it's not the first time we hear that question.
Okay. Anyone else? Yep. So the question was about native code. Actually, the playbook and the BlackBerry 10 phones, they both support native, right? So there's no Java runtime other than the Android runtime. Okay, so basically we're talking about the Android runtime and the support for the ARM native code, right? So that's why we have the session to talk about how to port. We put a restriction on our Android runtime. It's a great runtime, by the way, so if you have any Android games, you can probably just convert them straight away. But basically, if you're running anything with like Google Service APIs, like Google Maps, or effectively native code, we don't allow that on our platform. And the reason for that is, the fact that, Android it's a bridge for you guys, right? But if you have a native activity, it should be very easy for you just to port it. Sorry? It's not a limitation. We could do it, but the decision was not to. Right? So, and the reason for that is because, we do have a restriction with Android apps being only available in the... Mm-hmm. Well, the OpenGL support in the Android runtime is nice if you use the Java versions, right? So if you're using the native stuff, then there's no way it's going to be working on the Android runtime. But, you could actually just, recompile that for a native app. Just look at the samples and recompile it. And I think there's a good session on that today. There'll be, actually tomorrow with the Android and iOS porting. So, but there's no way we're going to have native support. I know that we can do it, but there's a business reason why we haven't done it. So, yeah. No one else? One more, yeah.
Can I capture the camera input directly from the hardware so I can use it in an AR game? Yes or no?
We had a demo here, actually the stunts game.
I want the algorithm to be as fast as possible.
Yeah, of course, but
That's the reason.
so there's a camera API. There's a good example called Photo Bomber that will you can take a photo, get the image, and do whatever you want with it. But with Scoreloop, the developer in this game. Yeah. So what he's done here is, see, we have the camera as well. Right? So you can take a photo of yourself and use it. Right? So I don't know exactly how much low-level interaction you can get with the camera, but you can request, a camera view and. There we go, nice. It's more ghetto. So you got to change that, I hope now. So, but there are great APIs for accessing these type of things, and obviously the developers taken advantage of the ability to define your own avatars in addition to their own. But it's very easy to support. I think it's only going to give you an image. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if they have that level of API. So, but basically, you can request the images and do whatever you want and display them.
Making the copies just takes a long time.
Yeah, it's duplicating it, of course. So I want to avoid that. But I don't know exactly what level of hardware support we have for accessing the camera. Are we going for time? We have a few minutes? Or?
Yeah, 10.
Yeah. So, any other questions? Normally, I would show you guys some code, but yeah.
Is there a way to disable like the camera sound? Like even in the game, I heard the camera sound, and it's like I'm trying to develop an app which disables it, but I can't get my head around understanding what to do.
So the question was about can you disable the shutter sound on the camera? I'm not sure there's an API. There might be an API for that. It might even be under the system settings, but you want to have it enabled for some things, but not during your game and so forth. It'd be a good change request or a feature request. Because I understand, as we were right, it would in the middle of the game with the music, it's a bit annoying. So I don't know if there is an API or if there is one planned. But we can definitely take it offline and request it. Anyone else? So you guys all ready to start programming for BlackBerry 10? Yeah? You already are? Good. So I think that's pretty much going to end our session. So we'll be around. You can ask us questions. As I said, I've done development myself. Julien works in the dev relations in Scoreloop, so he'll be the one you can ask questions about how to integrate. There's a lot of things that can be done that if someone hasn't done yet, and you should take this opportunity to do something different. Okay? So, thanks.